Howdy! Section 3.3, Diagrams of Truth Value, is basically an extension of the last section as we work through the textbook by Suppes and Hill. I'm the amateur logician.
Recall a molecular sentence is composed of one or more atomic sentences that relate together by sentential connectives. We can determine the truth value of a molecular sentence if we know the truth value of each of its atomic sentences. So we're given the example from page 120 of this very large molecular sentence. We want to know if it's true or false, given that the atomic sentence A is true, that the atomic sentence B is false, and that the atomic sentence C is false. So we're going to first label each of the atomic sentences here. So A is true, B is false, A is true, C is false, and A is true. Well, we can first work on this not A, so that turns it into something that's false. We have this little molecular sentence here. This is disjunction, and there has to only be one choice that's true, and we do have that, so that sentence is true. We then have this overall conjunction, but in a conjunction, both options have to be true, but we have something that's false, so that is indeed false. If we go over here, if C then A, the antecedent is false, the consequent is true, so that conditional is true. If we apply the negation, that truth value turns into falsity. And now we have this if-then relation. So the antecedent is false, and the consequent is false, but that preserves the truth value of that conditional. So overall, that sentence is true given those truth values of those atomic sentences. So you saw what I did there. I just labeled each atomic sentence. I then worked on the smallest molecular sentences within that very large molecular sentence and just built up from there to solve the problem. In this video, we'll be working on 10 problems from exercise 6A on page 120. We just want to find out if the given molecular sentence is true or false, given that the atomic sentence P is true, that Q is true, that A is false, and that B is false. So number one, we have this conditional, and in the consequent, we have another conditional. So let's first label what we know. We know that P is true and that Q is true. We'll then work on this molecular sentence here. So both the antecedent and the consequent are true, so that conditional is true. Now we can work on the major connective. So we have a true antecedent, true consequent, so it is indeed true. And number two, let's label what we know. So A is true. No, A is not true, sorry. A is false. P is true, P is true, A is false. So we'll work on this molecular sentence first. So the consequent is true, so that conditional is definitely true. But here we have the consequent is false, and the antecedent is true, so that is a false conditional. And now we can do our dominant major sentential connective. The consequent is false, the antecedent is true, so this is indeed false. Let's work on number three. What is the truth value of that molecular sentence? We know that P is true. We know that A is false, P is true. So we'll work on this subset molecular sentence, so to speak. So the consequent is false, but the antecedent is true, so that is a false conditional. And over here we have a false antecedent and true consequent. That conditional is true. Now we can do our major dominant conditional connective. So we have a false antecedent, true consequent, so that is a true sentence. So overall, number three is true. And number four, let's see, we know that P is true, A is false, P is true, A is false. Let's first work on this negation. So if true is not the case, then it's false. And we have a negation here. So the falsity turns into something that's true. If we work on this conditional here, we have the antecedent is false, but the consequent is true. Consequent is true, so it's a true conditional. And over here, we have another conditional, but the consequent is false with a true antecedent, so that's a false conditional. Now we're going to deal with our major connective. So we have false antecedent, but true consequent. But because the consequent is true, we have a true statement. So this is overall a true molecular sentence. Let's take a look at number 5. P is true. Q is true. P is true. Q is true. Let's first work on these negations here. So if it's not the case that it is true, then it's false. Here's another negation. If it's not the case that it is true, it is false. And here we have a disjunction. Both are false. You need at least one true choice, so that is a false disjunction. And over here, we have a conjunction, and both values are true, so that conjunction is true. But we're going to negate that, so that's false. And now we can deal with our major dominant sentential connective, which is a conditional, if-then. The antecedent is false, the consequent is false, so it is a true conditional. So number 5 is true. Halfway done, 5 more problems to go. Number 6, let's see, we have P is true, B happens to be false, P is true, B is false. So let's work on these negations. So we have not P, so that true value turns into a false value. Not B, so that false value turns into a true statement, a true value. And here we have a conjunction. In a conjunction, both values have to be true, but that's not the case, so that's a false conjunction. And over here, we have another conjunction, but one option is false, so it's a false conjunction. Then let's negate that, so we get true value. Now we have our dominant sentential connective, which is a conditional if-then. The consequent is false, but the antecedent is true, so this is a false statement. So number 6 is false. Together, let's look at number 7. So we know that P is true, Q is true, B is false, P is true, Q is true, B is false. If we look here at this P and Q, we have a conjunction, and both P and Q are true, so that is in fact a true conjunction. Now we can look at this conditional here. So the antecedent is true, but the consequent is false, so that is a false conditional. If we move over here with if Q then B, we have a false consequent, true antecedent, so that's a false conditional. Now if we look at this, another conditional, we have a true antecedent, false consequent, so it's a false conditional. Now we can deal with our dominant sentential connective, which is another if-then statement. Antecedent is false, consequent is false, but that preserves the value of the conditional being true. So overall, number 7 is true. Number 8, we know that P is true, B is false, B is false, A is false. So if we deal with this here, we have a disjunction, and only one value has to be true, so that disjunction is true. And here we have another disjunction. Both are false, so that is a false disjunction. Now we have a conditional, or pardon, not a conditional, a conjunction, but one value is false, so there's a false conjunction. Now we'll apply the negation. So if false is not the case, then we have a value of true. So overall, number 8 is true. Number 9. P is true, B is false, B is false, A is false. Let's work over here. We have this negation. So true is not the case, so that's now false. Now we have a disjunction. Both choices are false, so that's a false disjunction. We have a negation right over here, so that false statement is now a true statement. And we have a conjunction, but one value is false, so that's a false conjunction. And overall, our dominant sentential connective is a disjunction. Both values are false, so that is a false statement. So overall, number 9 is false. And finally, number 10. So P is true, Q is true, Q is true, P is true. Okay. So here we have this conditional. So the consequent in the antecedent is true, so it's a true conditional. Again, we have the consequent and the antecedent, both are true, so that's a true conditional. We have an if and only if. So here, both sides, so to speak, are true, so it is a true biconditional. So overall, number 10 is true.
I hope this video has been helpful. Up next is section 3.4, invalid conclusions. I'll see you then.